The rain fell like bullets on the abandoned industrial lot, each drop exploding against rusted metal and cracked concrete. In the darkness, 6 pit bulls snarled behind chain-link fencing, their ribs showing through matted fur eyes, wild with 4 days of hunger. 20 feet away, an elderly woman knelt in the mud, hands bound behind her back, rain streaming down her weathered face. Brett Huxley stood over her, one hand gripping the chain that held the kennel door closed. At 26, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His 4 companions, Colt, Wade, Trevor, and Jackson, formed a semicircle behind him, baseball bats resting on their shoulders. "You want to see how hungry they are, old woman?" Brett's voice cut through the storm. His hand moved to the latch. Delilah Brennan, 72 years old, owner of a roadside diner for 40 years, closed her eyes. She thought of her late husband, Patrick, killed in action in Vietnam in 1969. She thought of the young veteran who ate breakfast at her counter every morning, the one with kind eyes and a warrior's scars. She prayed he would forgive her for not being strong enough to fight back. The kennel door creaked open 6 inches. Then the night exploded with sound. Not one motorcycle engine, not 2, not 10. Over 40 Harley-Davidson engines roared to life simultaneously, converging from every direction like mechanized thunder. Headlights blazed through the rain, transforming night into day, illuminating every corner of the lot with brutal clarity. Brett spun around, his hand frozen on the kennel latch. His face went from cruel confidence to genuine fear in the space between heartbeats. 47 motorcycles formed a perfect circle around them. 47 riders sat motionless on their bikes, rain streaming off leather jackets emblazoned with the Hells Angels insignia. 47 men ages 58 to 72, who had ridden from 7 different cities across 500 miles because one of their own had made a single phone call. In the center of the eastern formation, one rider shut off his engine. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the thunder had been. Garrett Ironside Sullivan dismounted his 1998 Harley-Davidson Road King with the deliberate movements of a man who'd faced worse than 5 punks in a parking lot. At 68, he stood 6'1", his frame still carrying the lean muscle of his military years. The white in his beard only made him look more dangerous. Rain plastered his hair to his skull as he walked forward, water running in rivulets down the bronze K9 unit badge pinned to his leather vest. He didn't look at Brett, he looked at Delilah. His voice when it came was quiet, but it carried. "They thought nobody was watching," he said, speaking to the hundreds of thousands who would later watch the live stream, to the nation that would wake up to headlines about what happened here. "They thought a 72-year-old woman had nobody to protect her. They were wrong. In our world, a call for help travels farther than 500 miles when it comes from family." Tuesday morning arrived in Riverside, California, with the kind of clear desert sky that promised heat by noon. Garrett Sullivan's eyes opened at exactly 5:15 a.m., the same time they'd been opening for 40 years, ever since the Army had taught him that sleep was a luxury and alertness was survival. His bedroom was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a chair. On the wall, a single photograph in a simple frame, a younger version of himself, maybe 28, in desert camouflage, kneeling beside a German shepherd. The dog wore a military service vest. The man wore a smile that looked like it came easier back then. Beneath the photo, a small engraved plate, Duke K9 Military Police, 1989 to 1991 hero. Garrett sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, like he did every morning, looking at that photograph. His fingers unconsciously went to the long scar on his left forearm, a souvenir from an IED in Kuwait. The scar tissue was old now, faded to white, but some mornings he could still feel the heat of the explosion, still smell the burning sand. He stood, dressed, pulled on worn jeans and a black t-shirt that had seen better years. The leather vest came last, not the Hells Angels colors, not yet. Those he'd wear later. Right now, he was just Garrett, a man going through his morning routine. The garage was his sanctuary. His 1998 Harley-Davidson Road King sat in the center like a black altar. He'd bought it the year after Logan was born, back when his son was still a baby and the world still made sense. The bike was 27 years old now. Garrett had rebuilt the engine twice, replaced every worn part, polished every chrome surface until it gleamed. The license plate was custom K9 Duke. He spent an hour on maintenance, changed the oil even though it didn't need changing, checked the brake pads even though he'd checked them 2 days ago, tightened bolts that were already tight. His hands knew the work so well his mind could wander, and it did, drifting to places he tried not to go in the daylight. Kuwait, Duke, the smell of blood and sand, the phone call 5 years ago. Logan's name on the caller ID, but a cop's voice on the line. He pushed the memories away, stood, wiped his hands on a red shop rag. On his workbench, partially hidden under a stack of motorcycle magazines, was a small wooden box. Mahogany hand-carved, the kind of craftsmanship you couldn't find anymore. Inside the box, nestled in black velvet, was a dog whistle. Not the cheap plastic kind you bought at pet stores. This was military issue, brass-plated in gold with a frequency range designed for K9 units in combat zones. Engraved on the side, Duke, 1989 to 1991. Garrett picked it up, held it to the light, put it in his pocket. He didn't know why, just a feeling. By 6:30 a.m. he was on the road, the Harley's engine a familiar rumble between his legs. Riverside was waking up around him. Joggers, dog walkers, people heading to jobs they probably hated. The morning sun painted everything gold. He pulled into the parking lot of Mama D's Roadhouse Diner at exactly 6:45 a.m., the same time he'd been arriving for the past 20 years. The diner was a relic from the 1970s, all chrome and red vinyl, the kind of place that served coffee in thick ceramic mugs and didn't apologize for the grease and the bacon. A neon sign in the window flickered. Open, best breakfast in Riverside. Half the letters were burned out, but locals knew what it said. Delilah Brennan stood behind the counter, coffee pot in one hand, reading, glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the morning ticket orders. At 72, she moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this work for 4 decades. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Her hands, weathered and strong, never stopped moving. She looked up when the door chimed, saw Garrett down, smiled. Morning, Ironside. She grabbed a mug without asking, filled it with black coffee, no sugar, exactly the way he'd been drinking it for 20 years. The usual. Garrett slid onto his customary stool at the far end of the counter. Back to the wall, eyes on the front door, old habits from a war that had ended 33 years ago. The usual Mama D. She was already cracking eggs onto the griddle. Over easy wheat toast, bacon crispy. I could do this in my sleep. You probably do, she laughed, the sound warm and maternal. Only when I dream about handsome customers who tip well. It was their routine, the same jokes they'd been trading for years. Comfortable, safe. But today something was different. Garrett saw it in the way Delilah's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, in the slight tremor in her hands when she set down his coffee mug. Mama D. His voice dropped lower. What's wrong? She waved a hand dismissively. Nothing, baby. Just tired. Delilah. The use of her real name stopped her. She looked at him, and for a moment the strong woman who'd run this diner through recessions and hard times and the death of her husband looked old, vulnerable. It's nothing you need to worry about, Garrett. If it's bothering you, it's something I need to know about. She sighed, set down the spatula, leaned against the counter. There's some boys been coming around, she said quietly. Young guys, maybe mid-20s. They've been hitting up all the small businesses in the neighborhood, wanting protection money. Garrett's hands wrapped around the coffee mug went very still. How much? $500 a month. You pay it once, last month. I thought it would make them go away. She shook her head. But they came back, said the price went up. 1,000 now. You go to the police. I talked to Lieutenant Caldwell. She filed a report. But she told me, Delilah paused, choosing her words carefully. She told me the main one, the leader, his father, is somebody important. A politician. She said arrests have been made before, but nothing sticks. Garrett didn't say anything, just waited. His name is Brett Huxley, Delilah continued. Senator's kid, acts like he owns the whole city. Her voice dropped even lower. Yesterday he told me if I didn't pay, he'd let his dogs handle it. Said I should ask around about what happened to the homeless man last month. What happened to the homeless man? Delilah's eyes were wet. Nobody knows for sure. But there's talk Brett has pit bulls, that he makes them fight, and that sometimes when he's angry. She couldn't finish. Garrett stood up, put $20 on the counter, twice what breakfast cost. Where does he keep these dogs? Garrett, no. You can't. Where? She recognized that tone. The same one her husband Patrick had used when he decided something was worth fighting for. The same tone that had gotten Patrick a Bronze Star in a flag-draped coffin. Behind the old industrial warehouse on 7th Street, there's a vacant lot back there. People say he set up some kind of kennels. Garrett nodded once, turned to leave. Garrett, Delilah's voice stopped him at the door. Please be careful, he's dangerous. I know dangerous, Mama D. This kid doesn't. The door chimed as he left. Delilah stood alone in her diner, eggs burning on the griddle, and prayed she hadn't just sent another good man to his death. Garrett didn't go straight to the industrial lot. First he went home, pulled his laptop from the desk drawer he rarely opened, typed Brett Huxley into Google. The results painted a picture. Brett Aldrich Huxley, 26 years old, only son of California Senator Daniel Huxley, former Penn State linebacker expelled junior year for assault, 3 arrests in the past 5 years, 2 for assault, 1 for animal cruelty. No convictions. Every case dismissed or pled down to community service. His Instagram was private, but the tagged photos told a story. Brett at parties, always surrounded by other large men, always holding a drink, always wearing the expression of someone who'd never been told no. In several photos, pit bulls were visible in the background, muscular dogs with scarred faces and the lean build of fighters. One photo made Garrett's jaw clench. Brett holding 2 pit bulls by their chains, the dogs lunging at each other. Brett's face split in a wide grin. The caption, "Let them eat." Garrett closed the laptop, sat in silence. On his desk in a simple frame was another photograph. A young man, maybe 24, in a classroom surrounded by elementary school kids. The man had Garrett's eyes, but a gentler smile. Logan Sullivan, teacher, son, killed 5 years ago by a stray bullet from a gang shooting while buying groceries. Garrett had been 10 minutes away when the call came. 10 minutes that might as well have been 10,000 miles. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts to a name he hadn't called in 2 months. Donovan Wrench McClure answered on the second ring. "Ironside, it's been a while. I need eyes on something. You in Oakland?" "Yeah, what's going on? How fast can you get to Riverside?" There was a pause. When Donovan spoke again, his voice had shifted from casual to serious. "What kind of trouble we looking at? The kind where a 72-year-old woman is getting squeezed by a senator's son who thinks he's untouchable." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll make some calls," Donovan said. "Giving me 4 hours." "I appreciate it, brother. That's what we do. Family takes care of family." Garrett ended the call, stared at Logan's picture for another moment. Then he put on his Hells Angels vest, the real one with the full colors, and headed for 7th Street. The industrial warehouse district was a graveyard of better economic times. Buildings that once housed manufacturing plants now stood empty, windows, broken walls covered in graffiti. Homeless camps sprouted in doorways. Weeds grew through cracks in the asphalt. Garrett parked his bike 2 blocks away, approached on foot. He heard the dogs before he saw them. Barking, snarling, the sound of animals driven half mad by hunger or cruelty, or both. The vacant lot was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Someone had spray painted, "Private property, no trespassing," on a piece of plywood wired to the gate. Through the fence, Garrett could see makeshift kennels, cages really constructed from scrap metal, and more chain link. 6 pit bulls each in its own cage, each pacing back and forth in spaces too small for their muscular bodies. The dogs were in bad shape, ribs visible, coats dull, scars across faces and flanks. These weren't pets. They were weapons being honed. Near the kennels, a black Ford F3, FIFM. Pickup sat parked, lifted suspension tinted windows. The kind of vehicle that announced its owner thought intimidation was a personality. 5 men stood near the truck. One of them, taller than the others, broad-shouldered and heavily tattooed, was clearly in charge. He wore expensive athletic gear and had the kind of confident posture that came from never being held accountable. Brett Huxley. Garrett watched from the shadows across the street. Waited. Brett was talking on his phone, his voice carrying in the quiet morning air. "Yeah, Dad, I'm handling it. The old lady will pay." "They always do." A pause. No police reports. I made sure of that." Another pause. "Dad, I've got this under control. Just keep the development deal on track. I'll have the neighborhood cleared in 2 weeks." Development deal. Neighborhood cleared. The pieces started fitting together. Brett ended the call, turned to his companions, 4 men all in their mid-20s, all with the build of former athletes gone to seed. "Colt, you and Wade hit up the hardware store owner today. Trevor, you and Jackson take the laundromat. Same message. Pay up or we let the dogs out for a walk." Brett laughed. "These old-timers fold fast when they see what the dogs can do." The others laughed with him. The sound made Garrett's hands curl into fists. One of the pit bulls, the largest one covered in scars, began barking frantically at its cage door. Brett walked over, picked up a rock, and threw it at the cage. The rock clanged off the chain link. The dog yelped and retreated. "Shut up," Brett yelled. "You eat when I say you eat." Garrett had seen enough. He stepped out of the shadows, walked directly toward the gate. Brett saw him coming. His expression shifted from annoyance to curiosity to wariness. This is private property, old man. Can't you read? Garrett stopped at the gate, looked at Brett, looked at the bus, looked back at Brett. Those dogs licensed with the city? That's none of your business. Animal cruelty is everybody's business. Brett's face flushed red. He took 3 steps toward the gate, close enough that Garrett could smell the expensive cologne and the underlying scent of arrogance. You need to leave now before you get hurt. I've been hurt before, son. By professionals. You don't scare me. Brett's 4 companions moved closer, forming a wall behind their leader. Colt cracked his knuckles. Wade picked up a baseball bat from the truck bed. Last warning, old man. Walk away. Garrett held Brett's gaze for a long moment. He was cataloging details. The fence height, the gate lock, the positions of the 5 men, the layout of the kennels, the locations of potential cameras, none that he could see, escape routes, tactical advantages. 40 years removed from the army, his mind still worked like a soldier's. I'll go, Garrett said finally, but I'll be back, and next time I won't be alone. He turned, walked back to his bike, felt 5 sets of eyes on his back the entire way. Behind him, he heard Brett's voice. Find out who that biker is. I want to know everything about him. Garrett smiled grimly. They'd find out soon enough. By noon, the Riverside chapter clubhouse was filling up. The Hells Angels clubhouse was a nondescript building on the edge of town, unmarked, except for the bikes always parked out front. Inside it was part garage, part meeting hall, part home for men who understood each other in ways the civilian world never would. Garrett sat at the head of a long table scarred with decades of coffee rings and cigarette burns. Around him, 6 other members of the Riverside chapter listened as he laid out the situation. But it wasn't just Riverside in the room anymore. Donovan Wrench McClure had made good time from Oakland. At 65, he was one of the oldest active riders in the Alliance, his face weathered like old leather, his hands permanently stained with engine grease. He'd served in the first Gulf War, same as Garrett. They'd met at a VA support group in 1995 and had been brothers ever since. So this senator's kid thinks he can squeeze local businesses. Donovan's voice carried the rasp of a man who'd smoked for 40 years before quitting cold turkey. And the cops won't touch him. His father has connections. Every arrest gets buried. What about the feds? Already made a call. Garrett pulled out his phone, showed a contact FBI agent Nora Whitfield. She works organized crime. Said she'd look into it, but building a case against the senator's son takes time. Could be weeks, maybe months. Mama D doesn't have months, said Caleb Preacher, Thornton, 68 from the Spokane chapter. He'd ridden down overnight when Donovan had put out the call. If this kid is threatening her, he's threatening the whole neighborhood, Garrett said. Delilah's just the one I know about, but from what I saw today, this is systematic. They're trying to force people out. Why? Asked Wyatt Reaper Sterling from Portland. What's the play? Garrett pulled out his phone again, showed them what he'd found in his research that morning. Senator Huxley has been pushing legislation to allow casino development on reclaimed industrial land. There's a Vegas company called Sheldon Group that's been lobbying hard. If they can get this neighborhood declared blighted, the city can invoke eminent domain. Force sales at below market prices. And Brett's job is making it blighted, Wrench said, by terrorizing people until they leave. That's my read. Silence around the table. The kind of silence that came before decisions that couldn't be taken back. Finally, Otis Chains Walker from San Diego, 70 years old Vietnam veteran, spoke up. His voice was quiet but carried weight. Mama D gave me and 3 other brothers free meals every Sunday for 2 years after we came back from Iraq in 2005. Said her husband was a vet and she knew we were struggling. Never asked for a dime. He looked at Garrett. I'll ride, whatever you need. Same, said Wrench. Count me in, said Preacher. One by one they committed, not just the Riverside chapter, not just the men in the room. Within an hour, calls went out across the Pacific Coast Alliance. Oakland, San Diego, Portland, Seattle, Spokane, Eugene. By sunset, 47 men ranging in age from 58 to 72 had committed to ride to Riverside. Not for money, not for territory, not for any of the reasons the media like to assign to motorcycle clubs. For a 72-year-old woman who poured coffee at a roadside diner and had never turned away a hungry veteran. That night, Garrett couldn't sleep. He sat in his garage, the overhead light casting harsh shadows, and stared at the photograph of Duke. The German Shepherd looked back at him across 3 decades, frozen forever, in that moment of perfect partnership between soldier and dog. The memories came whether he wanted them or not. Kuwait, 1991. The tail end of Desert Storm. Garrett and Duke were on patrol near the Iraqi border when they'd spotted the convoy. Civilian vehicles shot up people scattered in the desert. A sniper team had ambushed them. 5 hostages, 3 children, 2 women. Command had ordered Garrett to wait for backup. Estimated time of arrival, 20 minutes. But the children were crying. He could hear them even at distance. "Sorry, sir," he'd radioed back. "Can't leave kids behind." He'd gone in, him and Duke, neutralized 2 snipers, freed the hostages, was leading them back to safety when Duke had stopped dead ears up, nose working the air. IED, buried in the sand just ahead of them, enough explosive to kill them all. Garrett had tried to disarm it, had almost succeeded, then gunfire from behind a 3rd sniper he'd missed. The bullet went wide, hit a rock near Garrett's feet. He ducked down, and Duke, beautiful, loyal Duke, had made the decision that K-9 units were trained for, but that you always hoped they'd never have to make. The dog had lunged forward, triggering the IED with his own body. The explosion killed Duke instantly, but it was early enough that the blast went up instead of out. The hostages survived. Garrett survived. Duke did not. He'd held the dog as he died, felt the heartbeat stop, made a promise through his tears. "I'll never let the innocent suffer when I can stop it. Never again." That promise had carried him through 33 years, through PTSD, through a failed marriage, through losing his son. And now that promise led to a 72-year-old woman who needed protection from a punk who thought dogs were weapons and cruelty was power. Garrett stood, went to his workbench, picked up the brass dog whistle. He remembered Duke's response to this whistle. The perfect obedience. The trust. He wondered if it would work on animals who'd only known cruelty. Tomorrow, he'd find out. Friday morning, Brett Huxley walked into Mama D's Roadhouse Diner like he owned it. Behind him came his 4 companions, Colt, Wade, Trevor, and Jackson, all carrying the slouched confidence of men who'd never faced consequences. They took over the center table, sprawled across chairs, Wade putting his dirty boots up on a seat. Delilah was behind the counter pouring coffee for an elderly couple. She looked up, saw Brett. Her hands shook just slightly, coffee sloshing over the rim of the cup. "We'll be right with you, boys," she said, her voice determinedly steady. Brett snapped his fingers, loud, sharp, like calling a dog. "Old woman over here now." The diner went quiet. The elderly couple looked uncomfortable. A construction worker at the counter tensed. Delilah set down the coffee pot, walked over with menus. "What can I—" Brett snatched the menus from her hand, dropped them on the floor. "Pick those up." Delilah stared at him. "Excuse me, you heard me? Pick them up." In the back corner in his customary seat with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, Garrett Sullivan watched this scene unfold. His coffee sat untouched in front of him. His hands rested flat on the table. To anyone watching casually, he looked relaxed, but his jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached. Delilah bent down, started picking up the menus. Brett accidentally knocked his water glass over. Ice and water spilled across the table, running over the edge onto Delilah's hair as she crouched. The others laughed. Delilah stood up slowly. Water dripped from her silver hair. Her face was flushed, but her chin came up. "I'll get you some towels," she said with dignity. "Forget the towels. We want food. Bring us everything. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, hash browns. The works. And make it fast." She turned toward the kitchen. Brett called after her. "Oh, and Delilah, today's Friday. Payment was due yesterday. That's $1,000 plus a $100 late fee. $1,100 total, you got it." Everyone in the diner was watching now. Delilah turned back. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess we have a problem." Brett leaned back in his chair, balancing it on 2 legs. "See, I tried to be reasonable. Tried to give you a fair deal. But you old-timers, you don't understand how business works nowadays. So now the price is going up. $2,000, cash, by Monday." "That's not fair." "Fair," Brett laughed. "You want fair. Life isn't fair. My dogs haven't eaten in 3 days. You want to talk to them about fair." That's when Garrett stood up. He didn't say anything, didn't make any dramatic gestures, just stood putting himself at his full 6'1" height and walked toward Brett's table. Every eye in the diner followed him. Brett saw him coming. Recognition flickered across his face. This was the old biker from the industrial lot. Well, the property inspector." "You lost, old man." Garrett stopped beside Delilah, looked down at Brett. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. The kind of calm that men who'd seen combat recognized as the moment before violence. "Miss Brennan, you okay?" "I'm fine, Garrett." I asked if you're okay." Delilah looked at him, saw something in his eyes that made her take a small step back. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm okay." Garrett nodded, still looking at Brett. "Your food will be right out. Why don't you wait for it outside?" Brett's face flushed red. He surged to his feet, chair clattering backward. "Are you telling me what to do in her restaurant? Who the hell do you think you are?" "Someone who's tired of watching punks intimidate old women." Trevor, the ex-military one in Brett's crew, moved first. Came at Garrett from the side, fist cocked back for a sucker punch. Garrett didn't even look at him. Just stepped aside with the economy of motion that came from years of training, let Trevor's momentum carry him past, and used Trevor's own arm to guide him face first into the edge of a table. Trevor went down hard, didn't get up. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. Wade grabbed a butter knife from the table, which was almost funny. Came at Garrett with it like it was a real weapon. Garrett caught Wade's wrist, twisted. The knife clattered to the floor. A quick pull, a pivot, and Wade was on the ground next to Trevor's arm, bent at an angle that made him scream. Colt and Jackson looked at each other, looked at their two companions on the floor, looked at Garrett, who hadn't broken a sweat. They stayed seated. Brett had gone pale. He pulled out his phone. "You just assaulted my friends. I'm calling the cops. You're going to jail, old man." "Call them," Garrett said. "Hello, wait." For a moment, Brett actually started to dial. Then he stopped. Because he knew the same thing Garrett knew, that having police come and investigate might raise questions about why Brett and his crew were in this diner in the first place. Might lead to questions about the protection money, the dogfighting, the whole operation. Brett lowered the phone. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "My father is Senator Daniel Huxley. One phone call and I can destroy your life." "Your father," Garrett said quietly, "is the only reason you're not in prison. But that protection doesn't extend to everything. Keep pushing, and you'll find out where the limits are." Brett's face twisted with fury. He looked at Delilah. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, old woman. Monday, $2,000, or you'll find out what my dogs do to people who cross me." He grabbed Trevor and Wade, both still groaning, and shoved them toward the door. Colt and Jackson followed. At the door, Brett turned back. "Tonight, old man, my friends and I have plans. You should stay home. Lock your doors, because bad things happen in the dark." The door slammed behind them. The diner erupted in whispers. The construction worker came over to clap Garrett on the shoulder. The elderly couple gave him a thumbs up. Garrett barely noticed. He was watching through the window as Brett's F-350 peeled out of the parking lot. Delilah touched his arm. "Garrett, you shouldn't have done that. He'll retaliate." "I know. He's dangerous." "I've dealt with dangerous before, Mama D. This kid is just cruel. There's a difference, but, what are you going to do?" Garrett pulled out his phone, started texting. "I'm going to make sure that when he retaliates, he regrets it." Within 2 hours, the first bikes started arriving in Riverside. Saturday morning broke over Riverside like a promise of heat. By 6 a.m., the Hells Angels clubhouse parking lot looked like a museum of chrome and black leather. 47 Harley-Davidson motorcycles sat in precise formation, their engines ticking, as they cooled from long overnight rides. Some had come from Oakland, 200 miles north. Others from Seattle, nearly 1,200 miles away. Every bike told a story in road dust and worn tires. Inside the clubhouse, 47 men stood around a tactical map of Riverside that Garrett had spread across the pool table. Ages ranged from 58 to 72. Gray beards and weathered faces, hands scarred from decades of mechanical work and harder living. But their eyes were sharp, alert, alive with purpose. Garrett stood at the head of the table. He'd barely slept. The brass dog whistle sat in his vest pocket like a talisman, Duke's name engraved on metal, worn smooth by years of carrying. "Brothers," he began, his voice carrying the weight of what he was about to ask. "Most of you rode 500, 600, 700 miles to be here. You left jobs, families, commitments. I need you to know what you're riding into." He tapped the map. Brett Huxley and his crew operate out of this industrial lot on 7th Street. They've been running a protection racket on local businesses for at least 3 months, probably longer. Small amounts from each business owner. Enough to hurt, not enough to make headlines. Donovan Wrench, McClure, Oakland, chapter president, stepped forward. At 65, he still had the build of the linebacker he'd been before the Army. "What's the end game?" "Nobody squeezes nickels and dimes without a bigger play." "Real estate development." Garrett pulled out printed documents. "Senator Huxley has been pushing legislation to allow casino construction on reclaimed industrial zones. There's a Vegas development company, Sheldon Group, we're ready to invest $500 million if the land gets cleared. Wyatt Reaper Sterling from Portland, 63 and sharp as a knife, studied the paperwork. Let me guess, the neighborhood around that industrial lot is the last holdout. Exactly. Brett's job is making the area so unlivable that residents sell cheap or leave entirely. Once that happens, City Council declares the zone blighted, invokes eminent domain, and Sheldon Group gets their casino. And the senator gets campaign contributions, added Caleb Preacher Thornton from Spokane. At 68, he'd been a Marine chaplain in the First Gulf War. He still carried a small Bible in his vest pocket, though he rarely spoke about religion anymore. Follow the money, always follow the money. Otis Chains Walker from San Diego, 70 years old and the eldest rider present, leaned on his cane. He'd lost most function in his left leg to an IED in Iraq but refused to stop riding. What's the play, Ironside? We can't just roll in there and start breaking faces. That's what they'll expect. No violence unless we're attacked first, Garrett said firmly. This has to be clean. We document everything. Video photographs, witness statements. We build a case that even a senator can't bury. Knox Gunner Fitzgerald from Seattle, 67, raised a scarred hand. What about the donks? You said there's 6 pit bulls. Garrett's jaw tightened. Brett's using them as weapons. Starves them, makes them fight, threatens people with them. Last night I did some digging. Found out a homeless man disappeared from this area 3 weeks ago. Witnesses say Brett and his crew picked him up. Nobody's seen him since. The room went very quiet. You think the ox? Wrench didn't finish the sentence. I think Brett Huxley is escalating, and I think Mama D is his next target. As if on cue, Garrett's phone rang. Delilah's name on the screen. He answered. Mama D. Her voice was shaking. Garrett, they were here. They threw a brick through my front window. There's spray paint on the door. It says, she paused, fighting tears. It says, next time we bring the bows. Garrett's free hand clenched into a fist. Are you hurt? No, I'm okay. But Garrett, I'm scared. Pack a bag, enough for a few days. I'm sending someone to get you. Where am I going? Somewhere safe, and Mama D, this ends tonight. He hung up, looked at the 46 faces watching him. We need a safe house, somewhere Brett can't find her. Preacher spoke immediately. There's a church on the east side. Father Morrison is solid, former Army chaplain. He'll keep her safe, ask no questions. Make the call. Garrett turned to Donovan. Wrench, I need you to coordinate surveillance. Teams of 2 rotating shifts. I want eyes on that industrial lot 24/7. Every person who comes and goes, every transaction, every conversation. And I want it all recorded. Already got 3 GoPros in my saddlebag, Wrench said. Old habit from the Oakland runs. Document everything always. Good. Chains, you still have that contact at NBC. The investigative reporter. Otis nodded. Kendra Ashford. She did that piece on veteran homelessness last year. Fair Thorough doesn't back down from powerful people. Get her on the phone. Tell her we have a story. Senator's son running protection rackets and dogfighting rings. But she has to be ready to move fast. Once this breaks, the Huxleys will lawyer up hard. On it. Garrett pulled out a hand-drawn diagram of the industrial lot. Reaper Gunner Dawson. I need you 3 to run reconnaissance. Map every entrance, every exit, every camera, every blind spot. If we have to go in there to extract Mama D, I want to know exactly what we're walking into. The 3 men nodded, already moving toward the door. The rest of you, Garrett continued, split into protection details. Mama D's Diner, Harper's Hardware Store, the Caldwell Laundromat, every business Brett has been squeezing. 4-man team's visible presence. We're not hiding. I want Brett to see us. I want him to know we're here. That'll provoke him, said one of the younger members, a 58-year-old from Eugene named Dawson Hammer Ridge. That's the idea, Garrett said. An angry man makes mistakes. A man who thinks he's invincible gets careless. We need him to move against us while we're recording. We need him to give us evidence that can't be buried. Wrench studied Garrett's face. They'd known each other 29 years since that VA support group in 1995 where 2 broken combat veterans had found Brotherhood. He could read Garrett better than most. You think he'll come after Mama D personally, don't you? I know he will. It's not about the money anymore. She defied him. I defied him. He can't let that stand not in front of his crew. His ego won't allow it. So we're setting a trap. We're creating an opportunity for justice. Garrett's voice hardened. Everything we do is legal, documented, and defensive. But when he makes his move, and he will, we'll be ready. The meeting broke up into tactical discussions, teams forming, equipment being distributed, communication protocols established. These men had been doing this kind of coordination for decades through charity rides, in club business, in the occasional jurisdictional dispute that required shows of force. The machinery of the Pacific Coast Alliance moved with practiced efficiency. Garrett stepped outside for air. The morning sun was climbing higher, promising another scorching day. He pulled out the brass whistle, turned it over in his fingers. A shadow fell across him. Preacher, limping slightly from old injuries that never quite healed. "You thinking about Duke?" Garrett didn't ask how Preacher knew. "Every day, but especially now. That dog saved your life. By giving his own. I never figured out how to make peace with that." Preacher was quiet for a moment. Then, "Maybe you're not supposed to make peace with it. Maybe you're supposed to honor it, by being the kind of man Duke thought you were." And what kind of man was that? The kind who runs toward danger when others run away. The kind who protects the pack even at cost to himself. Preacher clasped Garrett's shoulder. "Duke didn't die for nothing, brother. Every person you've helped, every stand you've taken, that's Duke's legacy. And Logan's too." The mention of his son made Garrett's chest tighten. 5 years hadn't dulled that particular knife. "Logan would have wanted you to help, Mama D," Preacher continued. "That boy had the biggest heart of anyone I ever met. Always rooting for the underdog, always standing up to bullies. He got that from you. He got killed because of it. He got killed by a coward with a gun. That's not the same thing." Preacher's voice was firm. "Don't let his death make you question his life. Or yours." Before Garrett could respond, Wrench came jogging out, phone in hand. "We got movement. Reaper just called from surveillance. Brett and Odette guys just showed up at the lot. But these aren't his usual crew. These look like hired muscle. Professional." Garrett's instincts flared. 8 plus Brett's original 4. That's 13 total. He's escalating. "Get the surveillance team recording. I want every face, every license plate, every word if we can pick it up." 20 minutes later, they were watching the feed on a laptop in the clubhouse. Wyatt Reaper Sterling had positioned himself on a rooftop across from the industrial lot camera with a telephoto lens capturing everything in high definition. On screen, Brett Huxley stood talking to a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit. Even through the grainy zoom, the family resemblance was clear. "That's Senator Daniel Huxley," Otis confirmed, pulling up a comparison photo on his phone. "In the flesh." They watched as Brett gestured animatedly, clearly explaining something. The senator's expression was cold, controlled. Next to him stood another man, mid-40s, also in a suit. Designer shoes. Rolex visible, even at this distance. "Run facial recognition on suit number 2, Garrett said. Otis worked his phone using a law enforcement database connection that nobody asked about and nobody wanted explained. 30 seconds later, Vincent Caruso, real estate developer out of Las Vegas, CEO of Sheldon Group. There it was, the whole conspiracy in one frame, senator, developer, and the muscle. They watched as Caruso pulled out an envelope, thick, handed it to the senator. No attempt at subtlety. "Are they actually—" Wrench couldn't finish, stunned by the brazenness. "Exchanging money in broad daylight," Garrett said. "They think they're untouchable." The senator pocketed the envelope, said something to Brett. Brett nodded eagerly like a dog desperate for approval. The audio was too distant to pick up clearly, but Otis had thought ahead. He'd called in a favor from a veteran who worked in surveillance equipment. A parabolic microphone, the kind used for wildlife recording, pointed at the lot from another angle. The audio crackled to life. Senator Huxley's voice tinny but intelligible. 2 weeks, Brett? Caruso needs this land cleared. I don't care how you do it, but make it happen. No more delays. Yes, sir, I've been working on it. The business owners are starting to crack. Starting isn't good enough. We're on a timeline. The casino breaks ground in January. That's 8 months. We need these properties condemned and cleared by October. Caruso's voice smooth and practiced. Senator, I've invested $50 million in this project based on your assurances. If there are complications, there won't be complications. The senator's voice hardened. Brett knows what happens if he fails. Don't you, son? Yes, sir. Brett sounded like a child being scolded. I won't let you down. You already have. Multiple times. This is your last chance to prove you're not a complete disappointment. The cruelty in those words hung in the air. For a moment, even through the screen, Brett looked small, hurt. Then his face hardened. I'll take care of it tonight. There's an old woman runs a diner. She's been the most resistant. I'll make an example of her. Once the others see what happens when you don't cooperate, I don't need details. The senator cut him off. Just results. And Brett, don't leave evidence. No police reports, no witnesses, nothing that traces back to me. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Dad. The senator and Caruso left in a black Mercedes. Brett watched them go, his face a mask of barely contained rage and desperate need for approval. Then he turned to his crew, the original 4+8 new faces, all big men with the look of people who'd done violence for money. Tonight, Brett said, we're done playing nice. The old woman thinks she can hide behind some biker friends. We'll show her what happens when you embarrass me. Bring the digs. In the clubhouse, 47 men processed what they just witnessed. We need to get that recording to the FBI immediately, Otis said. Garrett shook his head. Not yet. We have evidence of bribery and conspiracy, but nothing directly linking them to violence. A good lawyer will say it was just talk. We need them to act. We need them caught in the middle of committing a felony. You want to use Mama D as bait, Wrench said quietly. I want to protect her while giving Brett enough rope to hang himself. Garrett stood, began pacing. He said tonight, that gives us 12 hours. Preacher Mama D is safe at the church. Father Morrison has her in the rectory, 2 brothers on guard outside. She's as safe as we can make her. Good, but Brett doesn't know that. As far as he knows, she's still vulnerable. Garrett turned to the group. We're going to let him think he has an opening. Let him move on what he thinks is an isolated target. But when he does, we'll be there, Donovan finished. All 47 of us. Along with every camera we can carry, added Otis. Kendra Ashford is driving down from LA. She'll be here by 8 p.m. She's bringing a professional crew and live streaming equipment. Live stream? One of the younger members asked. If this goes out live, it can't be buried, Otis explained. No matter how many lawyers the senator has, he can't scrub something 100,000 people have already seen. Garrett felt the pieces falling into place. Here's how this works. We stage Mama D's house to look occupied. Lights on car and the driveway curtains open. Make it look like she came home from the church. Brett will assume she felt safe after we posted guards. Then he'll move on the house, Wrench said, and we'll be in position. 3 teams. Team Alpha surrounds the property at distance. Team Bravo stays mobile, ready to cut off escape routes. Team Charlie, that's me, Wrench, Preacher, and Chains were inside the house. When Brett makes his move, we document everything, give him every chance to back down, and if he doesn't, we defend ourselves, Preacher said. On camera, all legal. All legal, Garrett confirmed. We're not vigilantes. We're citizens defending property and preparing to make a citizen's arrest of someone caught committing multiple felonies. The planning took another 3 hours. Every detail examined, every contingency prepared for. Communication protocols established. Legal counsel contacted several members, had lawyers on retainer who specialized in motorcycle club issues. Medical support arranged. 2 members were former combat medics. By 3 p.m., they were as ready as they could be. Garrett stood in Delilah's house, walking through the space one more time. It was a small home, tidy and worn, filled with photographs of her late husband and memories of a life well lived. On the mantel, a folded American flag in a triangle case. Patrick Brennan's final honor. He thought about Delilah, 72 years old, widowed since 1969, who'd spent her life serving others and asking nothing in return. Who'd fed him for 20 years, who'd held him when he'd cried after Logan's death, who'd never once made him feel like a burden. Family takes care of family. His phone buzzed, a text from Reaper. Movement at the lot, Brett loading dogs into truck. Looks like he's preparing to move. Another text from the team, watching Brett's known associates. 8 mercenaries gearing up. Baseball bats, crowbars, 1 taser visible. It was happening. Garrett sent out the alert to all teams to positions. Radio silence unless an emergency. Cameras rolling. This is it. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Long shadows stretched across Riverside like reaching fingers. In the Hells Angels clubhouse, 43 men mounted their bikes. Engines rumbled to life, a chorus of American iron and raw power. They rode out in formation, splitting into 3 groups as planned. Team Alpha headed for positions around Delilah's neighborhood parking blocks, away invisible, but ready. Team Bravo staged along potential escape routes, seeming casual, just bikers hanging out, but positioned with tactical precision. Team Charlie, Garrett, Wrench, Preacher, and Chains took positions inside Delilah's house. Lights on upstairs and down. TV playing in the living room. Delilah's car in the driveway, borrowed from the church parking lot. To anyone watching, it looked like she was home. Kendra Ashford arrived at 7:30 driving a news van with NBC Los Angeles markings. She was 40 years old, African-American, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years digging for truth in uncomfortable places. She'd won 2 Emmys for investigative journalism and had a reputation for not backing down from powerful people. Mr. Sullivan. She approached Garrett where he stood in Delilah's backyard, reviewing positions one last time. Ms. Ashford, thanks for coming. Call me Kendra, and thank you for the tip. If what you told Otis is accurate, this is the story of the year. She gestured to her crew, a cameraman and a sound tech, both young, both looking nervous. We're ready to go live the moment something happens. My producer has the stream keys ready for Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter simultaneously. You understand the danger. If Brett sees cameras, he might bolt, or he might escalate. I've covered war zones, Mr. Sullivan. I can handle a senator's spoiled son. But her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her microphone. Brave, but not stupid. Stay in the van until we give the signal. When the action starts, you go live immediately. No delays, no second guessing. The moment it's streaming to thousands of people, it can't be buried. Understood. 8 p.m. came and went. 9 p.m. The neighborhood settled into evening routines. Porch lights flickered on. Dogs barked at passing cars. Normal life, unaware of the storm building. At 9:45, Garrett's radio crackled to life. Reaper's voice barely a whisper. 3 vehicles approaching from the west. Black F350, white panel van, gray Suburban. That's all of them. Copy. All teams hold position. Wait for my signal. Garrett moved to the window, staying back in the shadows. Watched as the 3 vehicles rolled slowly down the street, headlights off, using the dim streetlights to navigate. The truck stopped 2 houses down. Doors opened. 13 men emerged. Brett Huxley in dark clothes, carrying a baseball bat. His original crew of 4. 8 mercenaries, bigger, professional in their movements. These weren't college football players playing tough. These were men who'd done violence for money. And bringing up the rear on heavy chains, 6 pit bulls. The dogs were agitated, pulling at their restraints, mouths open, tongues lolling. Hungry, aggressive, weapons. Garrett's hand went to his vest pocket. The brass whistle was there, warm from his body heat. He thought of Duke, of Logan, of every person he'd failed to save. Not tonight. Brett was talking to his crew, gesturing toward Delilah's house. Even at this distance, Garrett could see the cruel anticipation on his face. The group began moving toward the house. Garrett keyed his radio. All teams, we have 13 hostiles approaching the residence. 6 dogs. Wait for them to commit to the property. Do not engage until I give the word. Acknowledgements came back, barely audible clicks. Brett and his crew reached Delilah's front yard. One of the mercenaries pulled out a crowbar, moved toward the front door. Signal Kendra, Garrett said softly. In the van across the street, the live stream went active. Within 30 seconds, viewers started joining. 100, 500, 2,000. Brett never noticed. He was focused on the house, on his moment of revenge. He raised his fist, pounded on the door. Delilah, I know you're in there. Come out or we're coming in. Silence from inside. Brett nodded to the mercenary with the crowbar. The man jammed it into the doorframe, began prying. That's when Garrett opened the door himself. The sudden movement froze everyone. Brett stumbled backward, nearly falling. The mercenary dropped the crowbar. Garrett stood in the doorway, backlit by the house lights, and looked at 13 men and 6 dogs with the calm of someone who'd faced worse odds in worse places. Evening, Brett, he said conversationally. Looking for someone? Brett's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, understanding, rage. You. Where is she? Where's the old woman? Somewhere safe, somewhere you'll never find her. Garrett stepped out onto the porch, hands visible, unthreatening. But I'm here, and I've got a few questions about real estate development and campaign contributions. Behind Garrett, Wrench, Preacher, and Chains emerged from the house. 4 men against 13. Brett laughed, a sound without humor. You stupid old bastard. You really think 4 bikers scare me? I've got 13 guys and 6 attack dogs. Do the math. I'm not good at math, Garrett admitted, but I'm great at chess. See, the thing about chess is it's not about the pieces on the board. It's about the pieces you don't see. He raised his hand, snapped his fingers once. The night erupted with the sound of Harley-Davidson engines were roaring to life. From every direction, north, south, east, west, motorcycles appeared. Headlights blazed. 43 bikes converged on Delilah's street, forming a perfect circle with Brett and his crew at the center. Brett spun in circles, watching as the circle tightened. His mercenaries looked at each other, the math suddenly very different. 47 bikers. 47 men who'd ridden hundreds of miles for this moment. The bikes stopped, engines idled, nobody dismounted. They just sat there, a wall of leather and chrome and absolute certainty. Garrett walked down the porch steps, moving toward Brett with measured calm. "That's better math," he said. "Now let's talk about what happens next." Brett Huxley stood frozen in the center of a ring of headlights, his shadow cast in 47 different directions. The confident sneer he'd worn like armor had cracked, revealing something younger underneath, something afraid. His hand tightened on the baseball bat. Around him, his 13 men shifted nervously, eyes darting between the bikes, calculating odds that didn't favor them. The 6 pit bulls sensed the tension. They strained against their chains, snarling foam gathering at the corners of their mouths. 4 days without proper food had turned them into something barely recognizable as domestic animals. Garrett stopped 10 feet from Brett, close enough to talk, far enough to react if things went violent. "Here's what's going to happen," Garrett said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "You're going to put down the bat, your boys are going to drop their weapons, and we're going to wait here together until the police arrive." Brett's laugh was high-pitched, desperate. "The police? You called the cops? My dad owns half the department." "I didn't call the Riverside PD." Garrett pulled out his phone, showed Brett the screen. "I called the FBI. Nora Whitfield, Organized Crime Division. She's very interested in your father's real estate dealings, especially after we sent her the video from this afternoon." The color drained from Brett's face. "What video?" "The one where your father accepts an envelope of cash from Vincent Caruso. The one where you discuss making an example of an elderly woman. The one where the senator tells you to leave no witnesses." Garrett slipped the phone back into his pocket. "That video, it's already in federal hands, along with documentation of every business you've extorted, every fight you've organized, every law you've broken while hiding behind Daddy's name." Brett's eyes went wild, looking for an escape. But 47 motorcycles formed a perfect perimeter. 47 men who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but whose presence was more intimidating than any threat. "You're bluffing," Brett said, but his voice shook. "You've got nothing." From the NBC News van, Kendra Ashford stepped out, her cameraman following. The red light on the camera glowed bright. "Actually," Kendra said, moving closer, "we have everything, and so does America. You're live right now on NBC Los Angeles, streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Current viewer count 82,000 and climbing." Brett's face went from pale to gray. He looked at the camera, at the red light at the phone Kendra held up, showing the live viewer count ticking upward. 85,000, 90,000. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. Turn it off, you can't." "First Amendment," Kendra said calmly. "We absolutely can, and we are. America is watching, Mr. Huxley. They're watching you threaten an elderly woman's home. They're watching you with attack dogs and weapons. They're watching what privilege looks like when it thinks nobody's looking back." One of the mercenaries, the biggest one, who looked like he'd done this professionally for years, dropped his crowbar. It clanged on the pavement. "I'm out," the mercenary said. "You didn't say anything about cameras. You didn't say anything about federal charges." "Nobody leaves," Brett screamed, spinning toward him. "You work for me." "We work for money," the mercenary corrected. "Not enough money in the world to go viral assaulting an old lady's house." He looked at his 7 companions. "Any of you got sense, you'll walk away too." 6 of the 8 mercenaries dropped their weapons and stepped back, hands raised. Only 2 remained, younger guys who looked like they still believed in Brett's invincibility. Brett's original crew, Colt, Wade, Trevor, and Jackson, looked at each other. Colt was the first to drop his bat. "Dude, my mom is probably watching this," he said. "I'm not going to prison for you." One by one, they all disarmed. Brett stood alone, still gripping his baseball bat, surrounded by men who'd decided he wasn't worth the cost. Then he made the choice that would define everything that followed. "Fine," Brett screamed. "You want to see what happens. You want content for your cameras." He turned toward the dogs, started working the chain release on the kennel. "Brett, don't." Even Trevor, who'd been with him from the start, shouted, "Not the dogs, man." But Brett was beyond reason, beyond thinking. The carefully constructed image of himself as powerful and untouchable, as worthy of his father's approval, it was all crumbling. And in his desperation, he reached for the only power he had left: control over violence. He yanked the kennel gate open. 6 pit bulls exploded into freedom. They'd been starved, beaten, trained to associate humans with pain and other dogs with combat. Their minds had been twisted into weapons, their natural loyalty corrupted into aggression. They scattered, initially confused by the lights in space. Then their eyes found Garrett, the closest human, the most exposed target. The lead dog, the biggest one covered in scars from fights won and lost, lowered its head and charged. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. 47 bikers reacted simultaneously, moving to help. Kendra's cameraman stumbled backward. Brett started laughing, a sound that would haunt the viewers watching from home. And Garrett Sullivan, 68 years old combat veteran, K9 handler, and a man who'd made a promise to a dying dog 3 decades ago, did something nobody expected. He knelt down, not backing away, not defending. He dropped to one knee, making himself smaller, less threatening. His hand went to his vest pocket, pulled out the brass whistle. He brought it to his lips and blew 3 sharp bursts. The frequency was too high for human ears, but the dogs heard it. All 6 stopped mid-stride, their heads whipping toward the sound. The lead dog was 5 feet away, close enough that Garrett could see the scars across its muzzle, could smell the desperate hunger on its breath. "Easy, soldier," Garrett said, his voice calm and low. The same voice he'd used with Duke 40 years ago. The same voice that had gentled, frightened dogs in a dozen combat zones. "Easy now, I'm not your enemy." The dog's lips were curled back, teeth bared. Its body was coiled to spring. But something in Garrett's tone, in his posture, in the absolute calm he projected, made the animal hesitate. Garrett slowly, carefully reached into his other pocket, pulled out a piece of beef jerky. He'd bought a whole package that afternoon, had it cut into large chunks, had been carrying it just in case. Just in case he needed to talk to dogs that had forgotten how to trust. He held the jerky flat on his palm arm, extended, not looking directly at the dog's eyes. A direct stare was a challenge. He kept his gaze soft, unthreatening. "This is for you," he said quietly. "No tricks, no pain, just food, because you're hungry, and that's not your fault." The lead dog's nostrils flared, catching the scent. Its tail, which had been rigid, twitched once. Garrett waited, didn't move, barely breathed. 120,000 people watched the live stream, holding their collective breath. The dog took a step forward, then another. Its head lowered cautiously toward Garrett's outstretched hand. Teeth that could crush bone gently took the jerky from his palm. While the dog ate, Garrett slowly raised his other hand, placed it on the animal's scarred head. The dog tensed but didn't pull away. "You've been hurt," Garrett murmured, his fingers finding the places where fur was missing, where old wounds had healed badly. "You've been used. You've been made into something you never wanted to be. I understand that. I've been there too." The dog finished the jerky, looked at Garrett with eyes that held intelligence beneath the trauma. "You're not a weapon," Garrett continued. "You're not a monster. You're just a dog who never got treated like one. That changes tonight. Tonight you get to choose something different." He pulled out 5 more pieces of jerky. The other 5 dogs had been watching, cautious, still aggressive, but uncertain. Garrett tossed the pieces toward them, not close enough to be threatening, just within reach. One by one the dogs approached. 8. Their postures shifted from attack to wariness, to something almost like hope. Garrett brought the whistle to his lips again, blew one long tone, too short, the pattern for sit that he drilled into dozens of military K9s over the years. The lead dog sat, then incredibly the other 5 followed suit. 6 pit bulls who minutes ago had been weapons of terror sat in a semicircle around a kneeling old man, their tails beginning to wag uncertainly. The live stream chat exploded. 150,000 viewers, and the comments were coming too fast to read. But the sentiment was universal disbelief. Hope. Garrett looked up at Brett, who stood frozen, his face a mask of incomprehension. "You trained them wrong," Garrett said. "Dogs don't want to fight. They want to belong. They want to protect their pack. You could have had 6 loyal companions. Instead, you made them into tools of fear. That was your choice, not theirs." Brett's baseball bat clattered to the ground. His knees gave out. He sat down hard on the pavement, staring at the dogs that were supposed to be his ultimate power, now docile around a man who'd shown them 5 minutes of kindness. "It's over," Brett whispered. "It's all over." Garrett stood slowly, careful not to spook the dogs. He walked toward Brett, leaving the animals behind. They stayed sitting, watching him go with something like confusion. "Yeah," Garrett said. "It is." Sirens filled the night. Not just 1 or 2, a full convoy. FBI vehicles with their distinctive markings, Riverside PD cars, even a SWAT van, though it wouldn't be needed. Agent Nora Whitfield stepped out of the lead SUV, 42 years old, African-American, 15 years, with the Bureau's Organized Crime Division. She surveyed the scene, 47 bikers, 13 suspects, 6 dogs, and a news camera broadcasting everything to the nation. She walked straight to Garrett. "Mr. Sullivan, I got your evidence package. Video, audio, financial records, witness statements. It's the most comprehensive case file I've seen handed to me by civilians." She glanced at the live stream camera. "And now you've got him committing multiple felonies in front of 160,000 witnesses. Arnett Whitfield, I'd like to report multiple crimes: attempted breaking and entering, assault with deadly weapons, specifically those dogs, conspiracy to commit violence. And I believe you'll want to talk to Mr. Huxley about his father's activities." "We will. Brett Huxley, you're under arrest." She gestured to her agents. "Cuff him, Miranda rights. By the book, everything documented." As the agents moved in, Brett looked up at Garrett with something close to desperation. "My father will get me out. He always does. You haven't won anything." Garrett knelt down to Brett's level one more time. "Your father is probably watching this right now," he said quietly, "along with 200,000 other people. He's watching his son caught on camera, watching his real estate scheme exposed, watching the evidence of his bribery become public record. Do you really think he's going to save you, or do you think he's going to sacrifice you to save himself?" The question hit Brett like a physical blow. His face crumpled, because he knew the answer, had always known it deep down. "He told you that you were his last chance," Garrett continued not unkindly, "that you were a disappointment. He's been training you your whole life to take the fall for him. And tonight on national television you just did." Brett started crying. Not the angry tears of frustration, but the broken sobs of someone realizing their entire life had been built on a foundation of manipulation and conditional love. Garrett stood, nodded to the agents. They pulled Brett to his feet, cuffed him, led him to a waiting vehicle. The 8 mercenaries were cuffed next, then Brett's original 4. 13 men loaded into FBI vehicles while the nation watched. Lieutenant Rebecca Caldwell of the Riverside PD approached Garrett. "I need to be honest with you," she said. "When you first told me about this, I didn't think anything would come of it. I thought the senator would bury it like he always does. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. You were being realistic. The system is broken in a lot of ways. But sometimes when enough people shine a light on the darkness, even the broken parts start working again." Caldwell looked at the 47 bikers still sitting on their motorcycles' engines idling. "I'm supposed to cite you for illegal assembly. That many bikes in a residential area, it's technically a violation." "Are you going to call?" She smiled. "I'm going to exercise discretion, based on the fact that you just helped the FBI bust a major corruption case and probably saved lives tonight. I think Riverside can overlook the noise ordinance this one time." Kendra Ashford approached her cameraman still filming, the red light still glowing. "Mr. Sullivan, can I get a statement?" Garrett looked at the camera, thought about the hundreds of thousands watching, thought about what he wanted to say. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about vigilante justice. Tonight was about a community standing up for one of its own. Delilah Brennan is 72 years old. She's been serving this community for 40 years, asking nothing in return. When she was threatened, we came. Not because we're a gang, because we're a family. And family protects family." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "There are people watching this who feel powerless, who see injustice and think there's nothing they can do. I want you to know you're wrong. You can document, you can witness, you can stand together. The system isn't perfect, but it still works when enough people demand that it does." Tonight, 47 men ranging in age from 58 to 72 rode hundreds of miles because one person needed help. Age doesn't make you weak. It gives you the wisdom to know when to fight and the courage to actually do it. "What about the dogs?" Kendra asked, gesturing to the 6 pit bulls who were still sitting where Garrett had left them, confused but calm. "Those dogs are victims too. They'll be taken to a rescue facility, evaluated, rehabilitated if possible. I'm going to personally oversee their recovery. If they can be saved, they will be. If they can't—" He stopped, emotion tightening his throat. "Then they'll be given peace. Either way, they won't be weapons anymore." The live stream finally ended at 11:47 p.m. The final viewer count was 283,000. By morning, the recording would be viewed 12 million times. By the end of the week, it would be studied in law schools, replayed on news programs, and referenced in congressional hearings about political corruption. But that was later. Right now, in the immediate aftermath, Garrett walked back to where the 6 dogs sat. An animal control officer was approaching with tranquilizer equipment, moving cautiously. "Wait," Garrett said. "Let me." He knelt down again, pulled out the last of his jerky, distributed it among the 6. While they ate, he examined each one, hands gentle on scarred flanks and damaged ears. "You're coming with me," he told them. "All 6 of you. I've got space, I've got time, and I've got a promise to keep to Adbong, who died saving people 33 years ago. He'd want me to save you." The animal control officer, a young woman with kind eyes, stepped closer. "Mr. Sullivan, these dogs are evidence in a criminal case. I can't just—" Agent Whitfield's voice cut in. "Actually, you can. I'm authorizing Mr. Sullivan as a temporary custodian for the animals. He's a trained canine handler with military credentials. These dogs need rehabilitation, not a cage. If he's willing to take responsibility." "I am," Garrett said firmly. "Then it's settled." Whitfield handed him a card. "My direct number. You'll need to bring them for evaluation in 3 days. We'll need documentation of their condition for the trial. Brett Huxley, his 4 associates, and 8 mercenaries are facing multiple felony charges. The dogs are Exhibit A in the animal cruelty case. But the bigger trial is coming. Senator Daniel Huxley will be indicted within 48 hours. Bribery, conspiracy, abuse of power. The evidence you provided was the last piece we needed for a case we've been building for 6 months. Garrett absorbed this. He was already under investigation since January. But he's careful. Layers of protection, plausible deniability, expensive lawyers. "We knew he was dirty, but we couldn't prove it. Then you handed us video of him taking a bribe and ordering his son to commit violence. That's the kind of evidence that cuts through all the legal maneuvering." She smiled. "So thank you. You just helped take down one of the most corrupt politicians in California." Over the next hour, the scene slowly cleared. FBI vehicles drove away with their prisoners. News vans departed to file stories. Curious neighbors who'd been watching from porches and windows went back inside. The 47 bikers remained. Garrett walked to the center of the circle, looked at the faces of men who'd dropped everything to answer his call. Donovan Wrench McClure from Oakland, Otis Chains Walker from San Diego, Wyatt Reaper Sterling from Portland, Knox Gunner Fitzgerald from Seattle, Caleb Preacher Thornton from Spokane, Dawson Hammer Ridge from Eugene, and 40 others, each with their own story, their own scars, their own reasons for riding through the night to stand up for what was right. "I don't have words," Garrett said finally. "There's no way to thank you for what you did tonight." "You don't thank family," Wrench said. "You just show up when they call. That's the deal. Still, 500 miles. Some of you rode twice that. You left jobs, homes, responsibilities." "And we'd do it again," Preacher added. "This is what we are, Ironside. This is what we've always been. Not a gang, not outlaws. We're men who refuse to sit quiet when we see injustice. That's the real meaning of these colors." Chains limped forward, his cane clicking on pavement. "I'm 70 years old. I've got metal in my leg and arthritis in my hands. I should have been home in bed. But when you called, when you said Mama D needed help, there was nowhere else I could be, because she fed me when I was hungry. She listened when I needed to talk. She never judged, never asked for anything back. That's family. And family doesn't abandon family." One by one, the others voiced agreement, a chorus of commitment that spanned 7 cities and 500 miles. Finally, Garrett nodded. "Then let me say this. You're not just my brothers. You're the reason I still believe in people. You're the reason I got up this morning instead of staying in bed with my memories and my regrets. Duke taught me about sacrifice. Logan taught me about the cost of delay. But all of you, you taught me that I'm not alone, that there are still men in this world who stand up when others sit down, who ride toward trouble when others ride away. That's a gift I can never repay." "Don't repay it," Wrench said. "Pass it on. Teach those dogs the way Duke would have wanted. Show them that humans can be kind. That's how you honor what we did tonight." The bikes started pulling out formation, breaking apart riders, heading back to their distant homes. Some had 8-hour rides ahead of them. Others had 12. They'd arrive home exhausted, probably lose a day of work, face questions from spouses about why they had to drop everything for a stranger in another city. But not one of them regretted it. By 1 a.m., only the Riverside chapter remained, 6 bikes plus Garrett's 7. They rode together to Delilah's actual location, the church rectory, where Father Morrison had been keeping her safe. Delilah was waiting on the steps when they arrived, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm night. Father Morrison stood beside her, a thin man in his 60s, with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat before he'd heard the call to ministry. When Delilah saw Garrett, she ran down the steps with an energy that belied her 72 years. She wrapped her arms around him and cried into his leather vest. "I watched it," she sobbed. "The whole thing, on Father Morrison's computer. I watched you face down those dogs. I watched you save those poor creatures. I watched you save me. I didn't save you, Mama D. The Brotherhood did. 47 men came because you matter to them, Babarin. Because you've spent 40 years mattering to everyone who walked through your door. I thought I was alone, she whispered. I thought I was just an old woman nobody cared about. You were never alone. You just couldn't see all the people standing behind you. They stood like that for a long time, an old woman and an old soldier, both holding on to proof that kindness still existed in a world that often felt dark. Finally, Delilah pulled back, wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now you go back to your life, your diner, your home. Brett is in custody. His father will be in custody soon. The neighborhood is safe. And anytime someone tries to threaten you or anyone else in this community, they'll have to go through the Pacific Coast Alliance first. What about you? What will you do? Garrett thought about the 6 dogs sleeping in Father Morrison's garage, sedated by the veterinarian who'd examined them. Thought about the promise he'd made to Duke. Thought about the second chance he'd been given to honor that promise. I'm going to start a rescue program for dogs like those 6. Pit bulls that have been abused, trained to fight, taught that humans only bring pain. I'm going to teach them something different. Then I'm going to pair them with veterans who have PTSD. Dogs who've been to war meeting people who've been to war, healing together. Delilah smiled through her tears. Duke would be proud. I hope so. God, I hope so. 2 weeks later, Senator Daniel Huxley was indicted on 17 federal charges. He held a press conference proclaiming his innocence, but the video of him accepting cash from Vincent Caruso had been viewed 20 million times. His own party abandoned him. He resigned his Senate seat rather than face expulsion. Brett Huxley took a plea deal. 28 years in California State Prison, no parole. In his allocution, he described years of emotional abuse, of being raised as a tool rather than a son, of desperately seeking approval that would never come. The judge showed mercy only in accepting the plea rather than going to trial, which would have resulted in a longer sentence. The 4 original members of Brett's crew received 5 to 7 years each, the sentences reduced because they'd cooperated with prosecutors. The 8 mercenaries got 8 to 12 years, the variation based on their level of participation. Vincent Caruso fled to the Cayman Islands, but extradition proceedings began immediately. His casino project died before it started. The neighborhood around the industrial lot, instead of being condemned, was declared a historic preservation zone. The empty warehouse was converted into a community center, funded by the money seized from Senator Huxley's accounts. They named it the Delilah Brennan Veterans and Community Center. And in the back where the dog-fighting pens used to stand, Garrett built something new. Duke's Legacy K9 Rescue and Rehabilitation. 6 months after that night, Garrett stood in the training yard watching 6 pit bulls who were no longer weapons. They had names now. Courage, hope, justice, peace, honor, freedom. They were learning to be dogs again. Courage, the lead dog with all the scars, sat beside a young man in a wheelchair. Corporal Ryan Mitchell, 29 years old. Iraq veteran, suffering from PTSD, so severe he'd planned to kill himself. But he'd seen the live stream, seen an old man gentle traumatized dogs with nothing but patience and beef jerky, seen proof that broken things could heal. He'd called the next day asking if he could help. Now 6 months later, he was the assistant trainer, and courage went everywhere with him, a 90-pound reminder that survival was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that the damage of the past didn't have to define the future. 18 other veterans were in the program now. 18 dogs rescued from fighting rings, abuse situations, abandonment. 18 pairs learning to save each other. Garrett watched them work together and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace, Delilah's diner was thriving. She'd expanded, hired 3 more staff, all veterans recommended by Garrett. The wall behind the counter now displayed 47 photographs. The men who'd ridden through the night. The Brotherhood. Every 3rd Sunday they gathered there. Not all 47 people had lives, commitments, distance to manage. But usually 20 or 30 would make the ride. They'd fill the diner, tell stories, remember what they'd done together. Remember what was possible when people chose to stand together. A year after the night that changed everything, Garrett received a letter. Prison stationery. Brett Huxley's name in the return address. He almost threw it away, but something made him open it. The letter was short. Mr. Sullivan, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I watch the video sometimes. The guards let me access it on supervised computer time. I watch you with those dogs. Watch you give them something I tried to take away. Watch you show them kindness when I only showed them cruelty. I'm trying to understand how to be that kind of man. I don't know if I can, but I'm trying. That's more than I was doing before. Thank you for showing me that change is possible, even for people like me, even for monsters. Brett. Garrett read it twice, then he wrote back, Brett, you're not a monster. You're a man who did monstrous things. There's a difference. Monsters can't change. Men can. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But if 6 dogs who were trained to kill can learn to be gentle, then you can learn to be better than your father taught you to be. Don't give up. Garrett. He mailed it the same day. On the anniversary of the live stream, Kendra Ashford did a follow-up story. She interviewed Garrett Delilah, the 47 bikers, the 18 veterans in the K9 program, and even Lieutenant Caldwell, who'd been promoted to captain and put in charge of a new community policing initiative. The piece aired on primetime NBC. 20 million viewers watched the update, saw the transformation of the neighborhood, saw the rescue program, saw proof that standing up to corruption could create lasting change. At the end of the piece, Kendra asked Garrett one final question. What do you want people to take away from this story? Garrett thought for a moment. Behind him, visible through the fence, 6 rehabilitated pit bulls played with their veteran partners. Proof that damage could heal, that violence could be transformed into peace. I want people to know that age is not weakness, he said finally. That brotherhood is real. That 47 men ranging from 58 to 72 can still change the world when they decide to stand together. That a 72-year-old woman running a diner matters just as much as a senator. That dogs trained to fight can learn to love. That veterans with PTSD can find purpose. That broken systems can be fixed when enough people refuse to accept that they're broken. He paused, looking at the camera, thinking of Duke and Logan and all the people he'd failed to save. But most of all, I want people to know they're not alone. When you stand up for what's right, when you protect the vulnerable, when you refuse to be a bystander to injustice, you're not standing alone. There's a whole community of people just like you. And when you call for help, they'll come. They'll ride 500 miles through the night. They'll face down bad odds. They'll stand beside you in the darkness. Because that's what family does. And family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters. The camera panned out, showing the whole rescue center. Veterans and dogs, bikers and community members, Father Morrison and Delilah. All the people whose lives had intersected on one rainy night when an old soldier decided he couldn't stand by anymore. The screen faded to black. White text appeared, dedicated to all who stand when others fall. For Duke K9 Hero 1989 to 1991. For Logan Sullivan Teacher and Son 1995 to 2019. For Delilah Brennan, who taught us the meaning of family. And for the 47 riders of the Pacific Coast Alliance, who proved that brotherhood knows no distance. The final image, Garrett Sullivan, 69 years old now, walking through the rescue center with 6 rehabilitated dogs following him, his hand resting on Courage's scarred head. Both of them, man and dog, carrying the weight of their past, but choosing to build something better with their futures. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows that reached toward tomorrow. And somewhere in the place where fallen soldiers and faithful dogs go to rest, Duke watched his handler keep the promise made 3 decades ago in a desert far from home. Protect the innocent. Stand against cruelty. Never leave the vulnerable to face darkness alone. The promise had been kept. The story ended where it began, with one man deciding that silence was not an option, that age was not an excuse, that justice delayed was justice denied. And with 46 brothers who heard that call and answered without hesitation. Because that's what family does.